So let's fill out a brief, and we're going to look at what our brand identity is and start to fill out those sections. So I'm going to take my brand. It's called Velvet Cocoa. Okay, so we're just going to fill out the photography brief. So I've started off by adding in the name of my brand, which is going to be Velvet Cocoa, my name, my email. You're welcome to email this as it's not real. And likewise, it's true for the website. So the next aspects that we're going to look at require some understanding. So there's the type of shoot. And the type of shoot basically is outlining what the type of photography that we're going to be doing is. So for this shoot, as we're going to be creating some imagery for our chocolate, it's going to be a product lifestyle. Okay, and then what's the purpose of the images? So what's important here is that we don't just write something generic like to create imagery or for adverts. We want to outline be a little bit more specific what we're outlining that the image is going to be used for. So I'm going to say to generate imagery for our website and new branding launch. The more specific we can be, the better we can refer back to and make sure that the direction of our project is more concise. Target audience. So what we want to think about here is not necessarily who the product appeals to, but who we're creating the imagery for. Now, in this instance, as the imagery is going to be used for advertising, the target audience is indeed who the product is going to be sold to. But in other instances, perhaps where we're doing headshots or other types of photography, our target audience might not necessarily be the people that we're selling to. It could even be someone internal. For this shoot, however, my target audience for this project is going to be young to middle-aged women who are affluent. And then the next aspect we want to look at is the key message or vibe, for want of a better word. And that's just basically going to flavor the overall creative direction to the imagery, and it should be representative of our brand. Now, my chocolate brand is particularly luxurious. Okay, so the next stage I want to look at is the creative direction. And this is where we're starting to dial in the specifics about the actual visuals themselves, what they're going to look like, what they're going to feel like. So I always start off by just putting together a range of keywords. Again, I'll return back to luxurious, inviting, premium, warm, feminine, and then the colors. And these are going to be inspired heavily by the actual chocolate itself and the other branding elements. Then there's the mood board, which I've already shown you. And then some of the important things that you want to look at is what are the do's and the don'ts. So with particular industries and products, there'll be faux pas, for instance, that you really don't want to do, that are overdone or they're tacky, that maybe you only know if you specifically work in that industry. So one of the things that I know I want to avoid in this is any melted chocolate or any fingerprints on the chocolate, for example. And then the next thing we want to do is put together an actual shot list. And the shot list essentially is going to outline what we're going to take pictures of. And the way that we want to break it down is first off by the actual style of imagery. So in this instance, because we're creating it for a website, there's probably going to be a handful of different actual imagery types. So I know there's going to be e-com imagery, which is photos of the product against a white background. And then another one, and then there's going to be some more creative lifestyle imagery. And we'll want to break that down a little bit further and talk about the specific use cases of each image. And that way, when we're either creating the imagery or handing the shot list off to a photographer, we can guarantee that all of the imagery that's produced is usable and relevant. The next thing we want to look at is the products to be photographed. Now, in this instance, we only have the one chocolate bar. But if you're dealing with a range of different products, it's important that we have those all. But in some instances, there might be 4 or 5 products coming out as part of a range, and we want to have each individual product there. Another aspect we want to look at is the key features to highlight of a product. So it's important to have this written down so that when we're creating the imagery, we can come back to it as a reference and make sure that we capture those features and highlights often as they're useful as a marketing angle. Then we want the quantity of each product. So for me, again, I just have the one chocolate bar, but actually, because chocolate spoils really easily, if we get any fingerprints on it, and it's really difficult to handle, we're probably going to send 4 or 5, maybe even more than that, of the same of each individual item. And it's important to write down how many of these are going to be required. The photographer might themselves request several of each individual product, and then any prep required. Now, this is vital. And in particular, for this example exactly, when it comes to chocolate, we'll need to make sure that the actual chocolate itself, because it's quite sticky, has been cleaned of anything from the surface of the chocolate. And also just before we photograph it with chocolate in particular, one of the things we do is heat it up just slightly with a hairdryer. And that removes any texture and really smooths out the surface. The next aspect that we need to look at is the location and the setup. So I know that for this shoot that the lifestyle imagery is going to need to be taken in a house. So ideally what I'd want to do is outline what the actual house or location is going to look like. And all of those sorts of things need to take reference from our brand. Backdrop preference. Now, again, if we've got a particular location, we're going to want to think about what the scene specifically looks like. For my shot, I know that the location is just going to be the background of one of the rooms. However, often for shoots of this nature, we might need a colorama background roll. And that's basically just a piece of long paper. And if we know we're going to be using one of those, it's important to get that written down so that we can make sure that it actually arrives for the shoot. Lighting requirements. So the first thing that we'd want to think about on this is, are we going to use natural light or artificial light? And if we need to use either of those, what do we need to actually style the light? How are we going to change the quality of the light? Are we going to need to make it harder or softer? So we need to start thinking about what the actual equipment that we require is. For my chocolate brand, I know that I want the lighting to be really soft and luxurious. So I want to make sure that I've got some scrims and softboxes, as well as some artificial lighting so I can create that lighting for the scene. Then we need the props and the styling. Now, I know that this location that I'm going to be shooting in isn't going to have everything that I want to style. So some of the things I might want to think about adding in is potentially a plate for the chocolate and maybe some other elements in the background. Potentially there's some cushions. I know I actually want a book for one of the images. Models. Yes, actually, one of the images I plan is going to feature a person. So I want to outline not only that I want a person in that shot, but what does that person look like? What's their age range? And in this scenario, it's going to reflect my target audience. Then there's deliverables. So deliverables, similar to the shot list, is going to outline exactly how many images are going to be delivered at the end. Then we're going to look at the file formats. Now, we might need to deliver imagery for print and for the website. So what we need to do is make sure that each one of those images that's delivered, we have multiple. So some will be web optimized JPEGs and some will be print optimized, and the difference being their size. I don't want really, really big images on my website because it's going to make it run very slowly. Then there needs to be the image orientation. So is it portrait, landscape, square? Do the images need to have several crops so that they can work on different formats? The deadline for final delivery. So if it's going to be for advertising, we're probably going to have a whole campaign prepared, and we need to make sure that imagery goes with the campaign on that day. And then the editing and retouching requirements. So I know with my experience as a photographer that chocolate in particular requires a lot of retouching. It's a very, very difficult surface to work with. So I need to add in that I potentially need to get some retouching done externally. Then the final thing that we need to look at is the budget and payment. So we need to make sure that we've established a fixed total budget, or at least a fixed total budget range. And we'll make sure that we're checking against it all along to ensure that we stay within the budget. Also, if we're recruiting externally, i.e. appointing a photographer for the shoot, the photographer will be able to quickly make a decision whether or not this is a project that they could actually work on. If there's a deposit required, we need to know what that amount is so we can actually book the photographer. Often the photographer will give you the deposit requirement and then the payment schedule just to make sure that we hit that payment on time. And then finally, additional notes. So absolutely anything you can possibly think of that might be relevant, or make sure that this is added in. So now that we've done that for your chocolate brand, keep that around because we're going to use it as a reference for the next section. So to conclude, the brand is a set of principles and a story that we want our customer to buy into. Brand should be one that's designed to resonate with our target audience. Our target audience is a cross-section of the public based on their demographics. And all of these things come together to inform the visuals of our photography.